Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue to bring you the next part of Hoai Ca and Hung's story, a chapter that unfolds at a gentle, unhurried pace, yet beneath that calm surface lies a quiet accumulation of emotions, both warm and heavy with unspoken worries. The morning begins like any other. The small house still carries the lingering chill of the night, not yet fully lifted. Early sunlight slips through the cracks of the door, softly spreading a gentle golden glow across the floor, just enough to chase away the last traces of cold. Hoai Ca has been awake since very early. She moves busily in the familiar kitchen, her actions quick yet careful, as if even the slightest distraction might shatter the rare sense of peace surrounding them. A pot of sticky rice steams gently, the fragrant scent of rice filling the air, blending with the soft clinking of a spoon against a bowl to create a rhythm that feels deeply ordinary and comforting. Tony sits neatly on his chair, his small legs swinging lightly with each movement. Hoai Ca feeds him spoonful by spoonful, patiently holding his hand and guiding him on how to grip the spoon properly. She is not in a hurry, nor does she rush him. Each spoonful is slow and deliberate, as if every moment deserves to be cherished. Tony eats while smiling, his clear, innocent eyes looking up at his mother with complete trust. Occasionally, he clumsily drops a few grains of rice onto the table. Hoai Ca simply smiles, gently pats his head, and softly praises him. "Good job, you're doing so well," her tender voice filling the quiet morning space. Those simple words of encouragement echo through the small house, making the atmosphere warmer than ever. In that moment, everything seems to slow down. There are no heavy worries, no vague fears, only the image of a patient mother and an innocent child, enough to make one believe that life is truly peaceful. The small house feels wrapped in a fragile shell of happiness, temporarily shielding them from the turmoil outside, holding it at bay for just a little while longer. Yet behind that seemingly perfect scene, Hung's inner world is entirely different. He sits silently in a corner of the room, dark circles beneath his eyes from lack of sleep, his gaze distant and unfocused. He barely slept at all the night before. His body is exhausted, but his mind refuses to rest, caught in a relentless storm of tangled thoughts that will not subside. While Hoai Ca tends to breakfast and carefully feeds their child, Hung is trapped inside the images replaying endlessly in his mind. He has watched the security camera footage at home countless times. Every frame, every small movement, every passing second has been scrutinized over and over, as if missing a single detail could mean losing the most crucial clue. The cold light of the screen reflects off his tense face in the stillness of the night. The more he watches, the heavier his heart becomes. There are moments when he wants to turn it off, but he cannot bring himself to stop, as if an invisible force keeps pulling him back, forcing him to confront the truth. And then, among those countless seemingly meaningless frames, there is a moment that makes Hung freeze. The face of the man appearing in the footage is not unfamiliar. At first, it is only a vague feeling, but the more closely he looks, the clearer his memory becomes. It is a face he has seen before, remembered, carried with him through years filled with turmoil. A face he cannot mistake. The man who met his mother just before her disappearance is not a stranger at all. Realizing this, Hung's heart tightens painfully. His breathing grows heavy, his chest constricting as if being squeezed shut. That man is someone he once arrested with his own hands. Someone who had been hired to harm Hoai Ca. A name, a face tied to memories he believed he had buried long ago. The terrifying coincidence causes the fragments in his mind to shift and connect in ways he never wanted. While Hoai Ca is still bending down to wipe Tony's hands, Hung finally speaks up. His voice is hoarse from exhaustion, yet every word carries a weight that makes the air in the room sink. He tells her everything, leaving nothing out, from replaying the footage to the moment he recognized that familiar face. Each sentence falls like a slow, deep cut, leaving both of them unable to speak afterward. Hoai Ca is stunned into silence. The smile on her lips fades, and the hand resting on her child's shoulder trembles slightly. The house remains the same. Breakfast is still unfinished. Tony continues to laugh and chatter innocently. But between the two adults, a heavy silence has formed. The peace from moments before does not vanish instantly, yet fine cracks have begun to appear, quietly signaling the upheavals that are slowly approaching. The intuition of a son and the instinct of a police officer seem to rise at the same time, merging into a single, inescapable sense of unease. Hung could not be certain that something terrible had truly happened, nor did he have clear evidence to prove that his fear was justified. Yet deep within him, there was a quiet but persistent voice, constantly reminding him that his mother's absence was not normal. This was not merely a vague hunch, but a familiar feeling, one shaped by years of facing danger, by witnessing too many tragedies that began with the smallest, seemingly insignificant signs. The scattered fragments of memory in Hung's mind slowly began to piece themselves together. The meeting, the man's face caught on the security camera, the disappearance without a single message, all of it formed a chain of unanswered questions. The more he thought about it, the heavier his heart became. He understood that if he continued to hesitate, he might lose the only chance to uncover the truth. And so, Hung made a decision he knew was necessary, even though his heart was filled with anxiety. He would report everything to the authorities, share all that he knew, and at the same time, he would not sit still and wait, he would continue the search on his own. Before leaving the house, Hung turned back to look at Hoai Ca. His expression grew serious, his words carrying both instruction and quiet pleading. He told her to stay home, not to go far, and to avoid going out alone. That man was still an unpredictable threat, and Hung did not want Hoai Ca or Tony to face any more danger. Hoai Ca did not say much, she simply nodded, but in her eyes lay a world of worry. She understood the gravity of his words, and she understood that from this moment on, the fragile peace of their family was truly being tested. Hung took Tony to school as usual. The familiar road suddenly felt longer than ever. On both sides of the street, rows of trees stood quietly in the light breeze, people hurried past as they always did, and life around him seemed completely undisturbed. Hung tried to keep his voice calm, doing his best to hide the turmoil surging inside his chest. He adjusted his son's hat, carefully tucked a carton of milk into the backpack, and reminded Tony to listen to his teacher and eat properly. Every movement was slow and deliberate, as if he wanted to stretch this rare moment of peace just a little longer. Tony nodded innocently, holding his father's hand tightly, unaware of the weight pressing down on the adults' hearts. When the school gates slowly closed, Hung stood still, watching his son's figure disappear behind the iron fence. The laughter and chatter of children echoed from inside, sounding strangely distant. In that moment, he felt utterly alone, facing the growing anxiety tightening around his chest. A sense of emptiness washed over him, making his steps heavier as he turned and walked away. Hung began his search in silence. He went through familiar streets, stopped by small shops his mother used to visit, and asked the people she might have met. Each question was spoken in a steady voice, though inside he was constantly on edge. He studied every face, every subtle reaction, hoping to find even the faintest sign. But all he received were shaken heads, sympathetic looks, and brief answers that offered no clues at all. He kept going, from one street to another, from alley to alley, places his mother had once frequented, now etched deeply into his memory. The sun climbed higher, its light growing harsher, yet Hung barely noticed the passing of time. Each step carried another unanswered question. Each prolonged silence made the unease within him sharper and more defined. The quiet pressed down heavily, to the point where it felt as though it were swallowing the last fragile traces of hope. The more futile the search became, the more Hung understood that the road ahead would not be easy. There was no ringing phone, no message, no sign at all of where his mother might be or what she might have encountered. Only a cold, suffocating silence surrounded him, and a steadily growing oga in his heart, like a warning that everything was still ahead of him, and that the real trials had perhaps only just begun. While Hung continued his relentless search in utter hopelessness, far away, completely detached from the rhythm of his familiar life, the truth was quietly beginning to reveal itself in a painful and silent way. It was a remote rural village, hidden deep among desolate fields, where a narrow dirt road twisted through the land, seeing only a few passers-by each day. Life here moved slowly and quietly, almost cut off from the outside world. And it was in this seemingly forgotten place that one human fate was being held at the fragile boundary between life and death. An elderly woman, her body covered in injuries, was discovered by a poor old woman who lived alone in Dong Dai village, lying by the grassy roadside. It was late afternoon, and the fading sunlight stretched weakly across the dry, barren ground. The old woman had been on her way home after gathering firewood when she noticed a motionless figure on the ground, clothes smeared with mud, hair tangled and matted with dried blood. At first, she thought it might be someone drunk or collapsed from exhaustion, but as she drew closer, she was startled to realize that the woman's breathing was so faint it seemed almost non-existent. Without hesitation, the poor old woman summoned all the strength she had left and dragged the injured woman back to her small house. The house sat quietly at the edge of the village, with earthen walls and an old tiled roof, containing only a few simple household items. The woman remained unconscious for many days, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her head, arms, legs, and back were covered in wounds, some swollen and bruised, others already dried and crusted, layered over one another like the marks of prolonged and brutal abuse. That injured woman was none other than Hung's mother. In the early days, the old woman could only care for her with whatever little she had. There was no proper medicine, no spare money. She cooked thin bowls of watery porridge, rationing every grain of rice, feeding her one small spoonful at a time. She went into the forest to gather medicinal herbs, boiled them into crude remedies, patiently cleaned her body, and dressed the contaminated wounds. In that poor little house, there were no promises and no miracles, only simple kindness and quiet compassion, silently clinging to a life that was slowly fading. When the woman finally opened her eyes, her gaze was empty and confused. She did not know where she was, did not understand why she was lying in this unfamiliar house, and could not even recognize who she herself was. All familiar memories seemed to have been erased, leaving behind a vast, cold blankness in her mind. She looked at the poor old woman with caution and fear, as if any movement might bring another wave of pain. The old woman did not ask many questions. Day after day, she gently helped the woman sit up, little by little, with the same patience one would show a child. Meals remained thin porridge, sometimes with a handful of wild vegetables picked from the garden. Herbal medicine was brewed faithfully each day. Amid constant scarcity, that humble house became the only place that offered the woman a fragile sense of safety, one she could not yet name. As time passed and her health slowly improved, fragmented pieces of memory began to faintly resurface in the woman's mind. Not as clear images, but as broken sensations, vague nightmares that jolted her awake in the middle of the night. One quiet afternoon, her voice trembled as she tried to recount what little remained of her memory. She said she had borrowed money from loan sharks, that mounting debts had pushed her into a dead end. Unable to repay them, she was beaten and abused without mercy. The blows, the threats, and the overwhelming terror still seemed etched into every breath she took. She could not clearly remember how she had fled or how far she had run. In pain and panic, she only knew she had tried to escape, then everything faded into darkness. When she woke up again, she was in this house, beside a stranger whose heart was full of kindness. Fear returned as she thought about her children and the consequences that might follow if the truth were discovered. And so, she begged the poor old woman not to inform her family. She feared bringing trouble upon her son, feared causing further harm to the person who had saved her life. The woman chose to remain in that remote countryside, quietly recovering in silence. Each passing day was spent living with loneliness, loss, and memories too fragmented to form a whole. In that simple house, she existed like a shadow, carrying wounds not yet healed, both physical and emotional, unaware that elsewhere, her son was still searching tirelessly, step by step, drawing ever closer to the truth. In another development, while Hung remained consumed by searches that brought no answers, Hoai Ca stayed at home, waiting anxiously for news. Time seemed to slow to a strange crawl. Every small sound outside the gate was enough to make her turn her head abruptly, hope rising, only to fall again in disappointment. Yet amid those accumulating worries, Hoai Ca did not allow her heart to close itself off. On the contrary, the kindness that had always lived within her quietly spoke up once more, like a natural reflex when faced with the hardship of others. That afternoon, Hoai Ca heard that there were two young sisters in the village living only with each other. Their parents had gone far away to earn a living and had not returned for a long time, leaving the two children to fend for themselves in poverty. The older sister had been running a high fever for days, her body thin and exhausted, yet there was not even enough money in the house to buy medicine. Upon hearing this, Hoai Ca did not hesitate. She quickly gathered what medicine she still had at home, added a few eggs, and quietly made her way to the small house tucked away at the end of the village. The house was simple, its walls worn with age, nearly empty inside. When Hoai Ca stepped in, she saw the older sister curled up on a bamboo bed, her face flushed with fever, her breathing heavy. The younger child sat beside her, eyes filled with worry and helplessness, not knowing what else to do but keep watch hour after hour. The sight tightened Hoai Ca's chest. She gently asked questions, offered careful instructions, then handed the medicine to the younger sister, explaining how to give it slowly and properly, as if speaking even a little too quickly might deepen the children's fear. She did not stop there. Hoai Ca also shared the eggs, pressed a small amount of money into their hands, and told them to use it for now. If they needed more, they should let her know. She would continue to help. Her words were simple, without grand promises, yet they were enough to give the two sisters a sense of being protected. Seeing their eyes well with gratitude, Hoai Ca only smiled, offered a few more gentle reminders, and quietly left. In the midst of days weighed down by worry for Hung and his mother, she still chose to give warmth to others, as if that kindness were a thin thread keeping her from being pulled under by her own anxiety. When night fell, the house grew quieter. Tony was fast asleep, his breathing steady, his innocent face untouched by worry. Hoai Ca sat beside him for a long while, watching quietly, before finally reaching for her phone. She called Hung. The call connected after several long rings, and when his voice came through, she could clearly hear the exhaustion beneath every word. Hung spoke slowly, but firmly. He told her that he had just worked with the local authorities, that he had officially reported his mother's disappearance and provided everything he knew. Though there were still no clear leads, though everything remained uncertain, he made one thing clear: he would not stop. He would continue searching, continue following even the smallest trace, until the truth was found, no matter how exhausted he became. Hoai Ca listened in silence, not interrupting, her hand gripping the phone tightly. On opposite ends of the line, each carried their own worries, yet they shared the same quiet determination. That night, there were no long words of comfort, only a heavy silence intertwined with a fragile belief that no matter how long and dark the road ahead might be, they would keep moving forward together, leaving no one behind. In two different places, separated by unfamiliar roads and vast stretches of silence, mother and son continue to exist within the same kind of pain, the pain of waiting, sustained only by fragile hope. Neither is aware of the other's existence in this moment, yet the invisible bond of blood quietly pulls them toward one another, even as both wander lost among scattered fragments of life. Hung's mother is still there, very close, closer than anyone could imagine. In the poor house in Dong Dai village, she endures lingering pain day after day, slowly recovering in silence. Her body grows stronger, but her memories remain shrouded in a thick fog. She does not remember that she once had a family, does not remember that a son is growing somewhere in the world beyond, and cannot know that someone is desperately searching for her every hour, every minute. In that hazy state of mind, she simply continues living one day at a time, carrying an emptiness she cannot name, as if she has lost something profoundly important from her life without knowing where, or how, to reclaim it. Elsewhere, Hung is living through days just as heavy. He has no idea that his mother is still alive, that she is still breathing, still existing in this world. To him, the prolonged silence only feeds his fear, slowly eroding what little hope remains. Every step in his search carries the haunting worry that he may arrive too late. Yet he keeps going, asking, searching, hoping, despite the growing sense of helplessness that rises again and again in the face of unanswered absence. Two people, two fates, bound by the same pain, yet separated by lost memories and a truth that has yet to surface. The mother is very close to her child, unaware that she is being sought. The son searches everywhere for his mother, unaware that the life he fears may have already slipped away is, in fact, being quietly preserved day by day. This cruel irony stretches the distance between them into something that feels endless, even though in reality, they are only one turn of fate away from each other. The reunion seems to be just ahead, fragile, like the faint light at the end of a tunnel. All it would take is a single memory returning, a single clue connecting the pieces, and everything could change. But time waits for no one. Will memory awaken in time, before loss becomes irreversible? Will fate grant them the chance to recognize each other, before hope is swept away by delay? All of it still lies ahead. The secrets yet unspoken, the truths yet untouched, and the emotions yet to burst forth will continue to be gradually revealed in the next episode.